Hi, I'm Tim May, and I'm moderating this series of 10 conversations on expressive photography with Phil Douglis. Phil understands the nature of expressive photography as well as anyone I know. For 35 years, he directed the Douglis Visual Workshops, and he helped more than 10,000 communications professionals make and use photographs to express ideas, tell stories, and convey meaning. Phil says he's learned a great deal from those workshop participants over the years, and he also enjoys learning from the tens of thousands of images he's made in more than 60 countries. I first met Phil at Santa Fe Workshops in 2004, and we went on to photograph together across North America, as well as in Europe, Asia, Africa, and South America. Both Phil and I have displayed our images on various photographic websites, and Phil has put together a 5,000 image cyberbook on expressive photography at pbase.com. You can find the link to that cyberbook in the notes below. It has drawn more than 10 million visitors since he started in 2003. They have left more than 12,000 comments under his pictures, and Phil has answered each one of them. When the pandemic brought Zoom into our lives, I asked Phil to bring that cyberbook to life in this set of 10 conversations on expressive photography, and now he has. Enjoy. Oh, that's a beautiful picture, Phil. So, composition, organization, and expressing ideas with composition.
That's right. Record. Okay. Let's begin to talk about the culmination of any image is when you put it all together. So the word composition simply means that. It means putting it all together. When I first got into photography, the most daunting thing was to figure out how to compose a picture because I thought there were rules that you had to follow. Like if you play golf, you have to follow the rules of the game of golf. If you make photographs, you have to follow the rules of composition. That's of course nonsense because it sucks all of the creativity out of a picture if you become a slave to rules. If you find yourself doing things over and over so that everything is right and nothing is wrong, you will wind up with a picture that is empty of life, vitality, energy, and above all, meaning. And so I always have told my students, look at the rules of composition as guidelines. That's all they are. And they're in place because people love to have structure. They love to be told what to do and how to do it instead of thinking for themselves how to do it. And so learn them, if you will, but please do not follow them as a slave would follow a master. So let's look at 10 images that I've made and talk about how they are organized. I like to use the word organized rather than compose because composing suggests that you're creating a work of art, you're creating a work of music, you're all orchestrating something, which you are, but it's important to remember that everything comes down to what are you trying to say. And when you compose a picture, what you are doing is articulating an idea and helping the viewer to understand that idea. Let's go here.
Yeah.
This is an image I made in the Atacama Desert of Chile. It's one of the driest deserts on Earth. And there's no more fitting place to visit the Atacama than a cemetery. And I composed this picture or organized it by using a wide-angle lens and creating a path for you to enter. You see what I've done? I have a huge bunch of boulders here, which I call an anchor. And what an anchor does, it holds the picture in place while you explore it. It gives you a starting point. Now, again, that's not a rule, that's a suggestion. The boulders suggested a natural anchor. So I move in here, we're walking in here, we walk in here, and we explore the cemetery and move through it. And you'll also notice there's something else happening here. What's in the foreground are curved, lumpy shapes. And if you move through, you'll see them here. And then they get bigger and bigger, actually smaller and smaller in terms of what you see. But in terms of what they are, they're hills. And the hills are really big boulders that flank the cemetery. Tim, you have any observations on this composition here?
Well, and one of the things I can remember from you shooting with you is the sky is minimal because it's not interesting. It's got some clouds, but the other thing for me is the harshness of the crosses, the vertical and horizontal straight lines amid all the curves, and that's kind of evokes a sense of death and limits to life for me.
Right, right. I like what you said about the sky. I've always felt that if you include sky in a photograph, the sky must speak. It must say something. The coloration, the clouds, the relationship of whatever is in the sky, perhaps a contrail or a plane or a rainbow. Something has to work as communication in the sky to include it. And so I use my frame to crop out most of the sky, almost all of the sky.
Right.
However, if I wanted to say, Tim, that we are all alone in this vast desert, and I didn't make a picture like that out there that day. There was a distant power, electrical tower, or some kind of a satellite tower, far in the distance, miles and miles away, and it was very small, and the horizon was absolutely flat. There was just miles and miles of flat scrub and sand and that distant tower. And then there's this empty sky. There's nothing in the sky. And I included a great deal of empty sky because the desert was empty, the sky was empty. And the only thing I wanted to include, or emphasize, was that tower. And I did it by contrasting it to the empty sky and the empty desert. I made this image in a small town outside Khajuraho, India. And it was one of those moments where you see a picture forming in your mind. I was struck initially by the Coca-Cola sign because it was written in the Indian, perhaps the Hindu script here, and these Roman letters with the Hindu words, and then Coca-Cola. And I thought that was incongruity. And it was filled the upper corner of my frame. And then I noticed a big rock and a pile of dirt down here in the lower left-hand corner. And this created a diagonal relationship. And when you create a diagonal relationship in your picture, that's another compositional or organizational aid that will push the viewer again through the picture dynamically, because there's energy in a diagonal. It's not something that's arty or pretty. It has a function. It helps draw the eye through. And the space between the big rectangle and the small rectangle is a path again. And there was a kid sitting here. It was wonderful, but there was something missing. And then a little girl came into the picture. And when she reached this post, she was in silhouette, and I shot. Tim?
Yeah, and the light behind the wall behind her, this is perfect. And for me, the diagonal is delightfully curved also.
Yes.
The C's kind of going right down to the young man.
Yes, the C in the Coca-Cola.
Yeah,
They're really two C's.
yeah,
And there's a diagonal here that moves down because the Coca-Cola people designed their poster on the diagonal for a reason, because
right.
it gave it energy. Excuse me for a second here.
Yeah.
Jackson Square, New Orleans.
Move your cursor.
This is one of the most famous tourist shots that you could see. Andrew Jackson riding his horse in Jackson Square in front of the cathedral in New Orleans. And it was a foggy morning, very foggy and very dark. And it was a moody picture. And what struck me was the relationships between these trees, curving trees, and the upright steeples of the cathedral. And these two leading lines. A leading line is a diagonal usually that leads you into a picture. This picture is organized as a centered image. I rarely make centered images because they tend to be static, but this had energy from the horse. That statue is filled with energy, a rearing horse and Jackson waving his hat. And the pair of trees is echoed by two of the steeples. And what you have here is rhythmic repetition, and that is still another aspect of composition or organization. I had it in the rectangle in the preceding shot in India, and I had it in the boulders and the hills in the Atacama image from Chile. And here I have it in New Orleans, repeated from the pair of steeples and the pairs of trees. And then, of course, I waited for people to enter the picture, and I lucked out.
Well, one of the things I want to mention about this image is not only do you have the energy of Jackson, you have the curving thrust of those palms.
Yes.
And that it's not only that they echo the steeples, but they're pushing the energy to Jackson.
Yes, they're leading, they're diagonals.
Right.
Those curves, they are mini diagonals. And they're also rhythmic repetition.
Right.
They're repeating each other. And they push upward, and Jackson's horse is rearing, and you notice the tension in here, right? It's just, and then it became very abstract because of the fog.
Right.
And then people added, these are prime colors, blue and red. So it works.
Yep, it does.
And that's the ultimate question when you are composing or organizing a picture. Does it work? And the answer to that question usually is, well, what does it say? And there's almost a sense of reverence here because the church is a religious symbol. Jackson is a historical symbol, and the people are looking at them both with a sense of awe, with a sense of reverence. And that is how and why I organized this picture as I did. I was at the Chautauqua Experience. Chautauqua is a institute that was established back in the 19th century by a religious group to train and inform Sunday school teachers and became one of the world's most effective summer lecture programs, cultural programs that people flock to south of Buffalo, New York. And they have they have their own symphony orchestra. And I was allowed to photograph a rehearsal. And I went up in the balcony and they were getting ready to play. The conductor was fooling around with his notes and these people were chatting. And I saw the beginning of what I felt could be a pyramid. Look at this. The instruments, the diagonal flow of the instruments, the lean of the body, the arm, she's leaning forward. There are these wonderful rhythmic repetitions throughout this. And then the facial expressions, the energy of conversation among the musicians. And I made it black and white because I wanted to take out the colors that broke up the unity of it. Tim, you want to add?
First of all, move your cursor, but no, you reacted. That's exactly what I was reacting to it. And I hadn't understood the black and white now, but I really see it.
I made this in Guilin, China. 3 guys having lunch. I love this picture, and I love it because of the way it works. And this work it's like a structure. I'm like an architect here, designing a photograph. The first thing I saw was that you had these big men sitting on tiny stools, and that was an incongruous. You know, to the Chinese, this is perfectly normal, but Americans, Western countries really don't eat like this. And these low tables, they're little stools, and both their backs of the 2 men here are kind of leaning forward. There's this guy in the middle, and they create another triangle. And then out of this, you have these vertical lines here coming up, 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 repeating themselves as they move across. Then you have the slats of the table and the tabletop, and these slats in the stools, and the vertical posts and stools, all rhythmically repeating each other. And then you have the key to the picture is the guy on the left who looks at me. What the hell are you doing? In my picture. He has no idea why I'm doing this. Absolutely no idea. And you could see it in his face, holding his chopsticks there in the air. The other people don't care or don't know. But it's the structure of the photograph that makes the contrast and expressions here work. Tim?
Well, so a couple of things that I noticed. I'm less intrigued by the man on the left and more by the man in the middle. And there are several things about him. First of all, he's still eating, so his mouth is full, his cheeks are full. But the fact that he's got a flat head, flat top, kind of completes the flatness of the table and the flatness of the chairs. And the fact of the red characters coming right down on top of him and him being centered in there. Yes. I know you say you don't center very much, but
these last 2 are
right.
Centered compositions, aren't they?
Yes. And the flash of color amid a pretty much muted environment, otherwise black and
That's
brown
right.
and gray.
That's
and
right.
Dark. But those
red,
characters are astounding.
The red characters.
Yeah.
They're almost like a cartoon balloon coming out of his head.
Right. Wow.
We made this in Death Valley. There's this old hotel and old theater that this woman from New York created. It's in the middle of nowhere. I think that it's called the Amara Grossa.
Yeah, Opera House, I think.
Opera House and Hotel. and there was this peacock walking around. And I didn't want just a picture of a peacock. We've all seen a peacock. So I waited and followed it as it walked around. And there was an arcade in the hotel, outside the hotel, with all these posts or pillars. And I loved the way they were illuminated by light and shadow. And all of it repeats as it moves back diagonally from the left lower corner back into the picture, just as the green tail of the peacock echoes that long diagonal. And I saw that, and I waited until the peacock reached a point here, and I caught 1 foot off the ground. 1 foot is planted. As it turned, you see it in profile, you see its crown, you see its back, you see its tail, all in beautiful colors. And then this rhythmic repetition pulls you down to the promised land. There's this mysterious barred golden door at the end of the trail. Tim?
Well, and except for the barred door, the other thing that's happening with your composition, that the peacock is pinched down there in the bottom corner, but the monochromeness of the scene otherwise
Right.
Emphasizes the beauty of the peacock without accents, big tail open and all that stuff.
I was on a cruise and we stopped at the port of Manta, Ecuador. It was really a boring stop. I guess they had to get provisions, and we were in Manta for a few hours, and we were allowed to disembark. So I hung around the docks, and I found a tuna fisherman bringing in the catch, and it was getting along toward sunset. The sun was going down. So I worked here on a composition involving a man hauling a net full of tuna. You can see the fins backlit, translucence here. And what struck me immediately was the power of diagonals. And we have this huge steel structure here with all the cables, the lines are leading out of it. This half the picture. And in this half the picture, you have a net, which exactly echoes the diagonal thrust of this post and these lines. And you have the man who is in silhouette looking down. And so the picture comes together through diagonal flow, rhythmic repetition, abstraction, translucence, color, energy, the tension in the pulling back, the diagonal, the counter diagonal of his arm here. You have thrust and counter thrust in this picture. Tim?
Well, and I'm intrigued by the light, the fins being lit, and I'm wondering if the diagonals would mean as much without the verticals.
You're right. They have something to play against.
Right.
You and I were in, I believe this is a park in Kiev.
Yeah, yeah.
And we were looking down on a sidewalk, and I noticed that the pedestrians were evenly spaced as they moved through here. And it was a perfect example of modified diagonal. When I say a modified diagonal, it's not a true diagonal, it's not a vertical, it's kind of halfway in between. But they lead you in to trace the path of these people coming towards us. And of course, the foliage, the leaves, and the fallen leaves on the ground. Now, of course, I took this in full color. And when I had it in a color, the contrast of the black coats against the gray path surrounded by gray woods here was lost, and what we had was a riot of color. It was a much more beautiful picture, but the focus was not on the spacing between the pedestrians. This is a more grim, purposeful picture. It matched the mood of Kiev, my vision of Kiev, and yours probably too. This is where somebody smashed your camera, as you recall.
Right, I
So
recall very well.
you were in the best mood in Kiev. So this is the heart of the Ukraine. It's undergoing a great deal of political stress at the time. It was a cold day. Yes, it was a beautiful fall day. But I wanted to take the beautiful fall day out and let the composition, the rhythmic repetition of the bodies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, coming towards us, framed by those leading lines that take you all the way through the image. Tim?
Well, for me, they lead me down to, I'm sure he's not making a fist purposely, but the man, that also speaks of Kiev to me, that sense of punching.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing at your plight, but I made this picture right here at home in my community here in Phoenix. A neighbor put out a block of food for the parrots to eat, or parakeets or lovebirds, whatever you want to call them. Periodically, these birds visit Phoenix, Arizona in great flocks, and they come and they go. They come once every 3-4 years. And I was able to create a circular composition by waiting, by being patient. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 birds, each with a different, each in a different place here. You've got ones looking this way, this way, this way, but they create a circular flow. Mm-hmm. And the directional flow through a picture, the position of the blue tails and the red heads here, and the wings making a bridge from this bird to that bird, these birds slightly overlapping. There's tension in the space between these two tails. This bird is overlapping this one, and he's looking down. This is the only eye in the picture, and he's looking straight down. This line draws you down here. So it's a circular composition, and you see the texture of the food and the activities and the beautiful color. I mean, this would be nothing in black and white. This is a rich, colorful image, but it's put together, again, they put it together for me. I was standing there making dozens of photographs. I even did multiple bursts when the activity became, and in the editing process, I found this one that works because of its circular composition. Tim?
Well, it also works because of your depth of field.
Yes. Depth of field is what is in focus, what is not in focus. And since I have the block of food to focus on, and the birds were aligned with that block of food, they are sharp. And because I was using a long telephoto lens, I made this from maybe 15 feet away. The background of my neighbor's house is just suggested.
Right.
You and I were in this little town on the Mekong River, in the Mekong Delta of Vietnam. And this woman was bringing this boat into a dock. And I saw the reflection, and I saw her hat. I saw the colors on the boat. And I decided to compose this image by creating a powerful focal point. And this is something that I discussed really in the first image when I discussed the anchor. Those boulders in the Atacama were a focal point where it really held your eye and then caused you to move through the picture. Here your eye goes to the brightest spot of the image right here. the white hat. And because it is white and everything is in shadow, using my spot meter, and later in Photoshop when I was working on it, I could make the shadows darker. And this hat comes right out of the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
And she has a striped jacket, a jacket with stripes on her arms, an athletic jacket. And they create a echo of the hat in curves here. And then there is another echo of the hat in the edge of the framing that is on the boat itself. And then you see, after going there, the eye goes along the hull to this, which echoes this here, this little outcropping. And then you go up here and up, and then start moving down here. The next most powerful element here is the red, because red is really a strong prime color. And it's an intermediate pull that pulls the eye through. And you see the shadows, the play of light and shadow here as you move. And the red is repeated along here. And then you go down and the red there, and you hit the water, and it's all echoed, but dimly so in the reflection. Tim?
Well, the chicken.
Hmm?
The chicken.
The chicken.
Or whatever it is above the, I mean, come
This, yes, it is a chicken.
on.
I never saw the Tim. This picture's on my wall. I'm looking at it right now. I've never saw this before. I thought it was a wrapper or something. Piece of paper. It is. It's a chicken. I love it. You are always discovering things in pictures for me. And of course, that's the fun of photography.
Right.
The photographer never knows what he or she is getting, because years later they might say, oh my God, it's been there, but I never got there because I was so swept up in the power of this red.
Right.
I missed the chicken sitting on it. I love it.
Framed.
And this is the final image of our module on composition. Tim, do you have any closing thoughts on a composition? I think I've covered all the basic rules as I see them, which are made to be broken.
Right. And you didn't mention the rule of thirds in the least.
No, that is a fraud, because it's a built-in prism. Because in the prism of your viewfinder, you see, if you select it, there's a grid.
Right.
There's a grid of 4 lines.
Like a tic-tac-toe.
Like a tic-tac-toe grid. And they tell you always place your key point where one of the lines intersect. And then you're spinning, intersect, intersect, intersect. You're forgetting all about what the picture means in the process.
Right. Yep.
So I didn't mention it. Thanks for bringing it up. I would have kicked myself if I hadn't mentioned the rule of thirds, the hallowed rule of thirds.
Yes. And again, one of the things that throughout this whole series that comes to mind for me is that these are things to think about while you're out making images. And they're also things that come into mind when you're choosing and processing images.
Yes.
And it's not like, okay, this one's got to be abstraction and incongruity, and I've got to use it's going to be about color. And it's like, those are things that you, over time, become a part of the glasses you see the world with. And then they become kind of more important almost in processing and choosing, because with digital we make hundreds, thousands of images, and one particular scene can have 10, 15 choices.
Yes.
So that's when these things come into play also.
And you can recompose many pictures in Photoshop when you crop the picture.
Right.
Because the subject moves in the frame when you
Yes.
crop a picture. And you know, you really hit upon an important, summation here, and that's the point about this entire series of 10 installments. It's called Conversations in Expressive Photography. And what we are doing here, composition or organization, is the key to expression. It really is. What are you saying? What is your idea? Now, if you're not making pictures to express an idea, then you're not dealing with expressive photography. You're dealing with other forms of photography. And that's not evil or wrong. You're just making a picture to have a record of what you saw, which is fine. But that's not expressive photography. Expressive photography is telling a story, conveying an idea, expressing meaning. And that's what we do.
It's been kind of interesting. This is an aside, but I've been doing a series of postings around different themes. And this month I've been posting things of the flag and American flag. But I've been trying to select the pictures with the idea of meaning. And with comments, some of people are getting my ideas. It's kind of fun.
And then they might, but what's so great about this is there isn't any one meaning for a picture, because people have to bring their own point of view to bear. Everybody has a point of view that they bring to a picture. You have a point of view that you're trying to get across, and a viewer has a point of view that they bring to the picture. And if the picture is not a part of a story or has a long caption or explanation, it's the picture itself will say something, and the viewer will come up with their own answers.
Right, and that's fun to see.
It's wonderful. That's what makes expressive photography so rich and rewarding. Again, thank you again for giving me a chance to sound off on this, because composition, organization is the key to everything.
Wonderful. All right.
Okay. That was fun.